Hi everyone, this is Alice Green from Capacity and you're listening to the Fundamentally Different podcast. On today's show, we're talking about children and young people's mental health. When we talk about mental health, we talk about a wide range of things that can affect how a person thinks, feels and acts. It affects how some people function every day, how they cope with stress and how they build and maintain relationships. We're better at talking about mental health than we ever have been, and we acknowledge that everybody has it. We're all on a continuum of well-being rather than it being something binary that affects just a few people. We know as well that getting the right support during childhood is a fundamental building block to wellbeing in adulthood. So today I'm really pleased to be talking to two guests that are in roles that support children and young people's mental wellbeing here in Merseyside. I'm pleased to be able to introduce Carol Roche, who's the Joint Commissioning Lead for Children and Young People in Wirral Council, and Julie Graham, the Public Health Principal at Wirral Council. They've both spent their careers in public sector working to improve the wellbeing of children and young people. So I'll start by asking you both, what's happening locally in Wirral? What are you seeing?
We've seen an increase in children and young people presenting with anxiety. We've seen that year-on-year increase. We've also seen an increase in children with diagnosis of ADHD and autism, which we also know impacts on mental health.
And also increasingly complex issues that are impacting on young people, presenting with things like substance misuse, and there's an underlying mental health problem. So quite complex issues.
Yeah, they're really complex. I wonder, what do you know or suspect is happening underneath?
I think since COVID, there's been a really marked increase in recognising what good mental health looks like and what we need to have good mental health. I think during COVID, people realised the importance of getting out, exercising, having connections with people, friendships, interests that they couldn't do during that time. We know that children and young people have told us things that are important to them, which is getting out to having fresh air, going to parks, meeting their friends, moving their body particularly is one thing that they said, and we know the importance of exercise. I think all of those things during COVID were people were unable to do those things, and I think we recognise now that actually they are really good elements that make up good mental health. If we have a good balance in our lives and do some of these things, it promotes good mental health.
Yeah, that makes sense. So the absence of being able to do those things that promote positive mental health, you think is kind of causing some of the poor mental health that we're seeing. Julie, what do you think?
I think one of the big things for me is around social media and there are a lot of pros to social media with young people being able to resource information at the click of a button. But one of the downsides of it in particular is around the feeds that young people, some of the information that they're able to access. So if you think about things like self-harm, body image, that kind of thing, next time they go back online, that feed is there reminding them that they've been looking up those issues. There's also issues around online bullying. Young people no longer just in school where they're potentially being bullied, they'll go home and they'll go online, and that bullying will still be there. So a lot of cons to social media as well, not just the pros.
Absolutely. So it doesn't switch off, does it? As when we used to go to school and you didn't have that kind of pressure when you got home, you could kind of compartmentalise things a bit more perhaps.
I think there's also issues that are arising more and more frequently now around child and family poverty, fuel poverty, and in particular more recently, housing insecurity, particularly for children, young people and their families that live in the rental sector.
What do you think the impact of poverty is on mental health for children?
I'm guessing that, activities and being able to do things as a family or, do things, join clubs are all things that cost money. So I think it's that access to maybe more free community activities and, because finance has been an issue for so long, a lot of the organisations that could offer free activities for children, young people and their families, they're gone. The community associations, the voluntary community faith sector, they didn't get the funding they required, and that took out a whole range of support that was available in your own community.
Yeah.
I think one of the things of the impact of child and family poverty as well is the stress that it places on parents. And we know that there is a big impact of parental mental well-being on children and young people.
Absolutely. Yeah, it makes such a big difference, doesn't it? Having that safety at home and that psychological safety and that sense of well-being. We know that mental health in parents is one of the biggest factors in mental health in children, don't we? these are massive issues. We've talked about the kind of, the impact of COVID, the kind of holistic view of being able to do those things that kind of keep you well, the comparison issues with social media and the pressures in school and things like that, and the impact of poverty as well, which is rising and absolutely massive. It feels like these are kind of huge interconnected issues, and mental health kind of comes to the fore as one of the challenges that they present. It feels to me like it's things that kind of no one organisation or strategy can solve. Appreciate at the council you have quite a holistic view over public health and children's services and so on. I wonder, what do you see that needs to be done differently in terms of how we're working together as partners?
I think there's something around, we're much more able to talk about mental health, and we're all talking about mental health. But in some ways, in talking about mental health, it's almost like people want to have a service or an intervention to help them with their mental health. I think one of the key things we need to do is that it's a bit like normalising anxiety and saying everybody feels anxious, everybody has anxiety. What do you need? Do you need to go to CAMHS because, you're suffering with anxiety, or do you need a service? Or what about self-help resources? Or other professionals that can help you without you needing to go to a specialist service. So schools have more of a responsibility for promoting mental health. Other, activities in the community, if you're, a sports coach, there are all ways in which you can help young people with anxiety. And I think we have to kind of change that culture of saying that, because we're not feeling great, we need specialist help. Actually, there's lots of self-help resources out there. There's lots of things we can do to maintain good mental health. And for those people who then do feel like, I need a bit more help, this isn't working, we need to be able to make sure they can access the right service at the right time, in the right way. And we also need to make sure that we have the right support in place for parents and carers, supporting children and young people, and schools and teachers and other trusted adults, and they can be varied. They can be members of the family or, other professionals.
Brilliant. We've worked together over a number of years now with something that's in development, which we are launching the idea of today, called Branch. I wonder, can you tell us a bit about Branch, how it came about, where are we up to?
I think one of the really important things to acknowledge as part of the development of Branch is looking at how, kind of as a system for supporting children and young people's mental health and wellbeing in Wirral, we all came together. We've got a Future in Mind steering group, which actually has been operating since 2015 in response to the Green Paper. It encompasses a whole range of different organisations in Wirral who are all providing really, really good services and support for children and young people. They've all been regular attenders at this monthly meeting and shared kind of their ideas and what we could develop, what the needs that they're experiencing through the young people. And together, we've been able to come together and work on ideas, work them up, debate the possibilities, see what's possible, see what isn't, and look at how we can address those needs. And we've come together now. There's been a commission that's gone out, a competitive tender. And what we said we wanted as part of that tender was an alliance where organisations were all equal. They all had an equal say in what was being delivered and kind of how it was going to be delivered. And it's promoted a really strong ethos that's shared amongst the Future in Mind group and has ensured that kind of even people that couldn't be part of that competitive tender still want to be part of the group in solving some of these issues. So I think it's a really positive footing for us to take things forward on.
Absolutely. The alliance model is quite an unusual model. So I wonder, could you explain just briefly how it works?
There are 5 organisations that we have that have come forward to be in that alliance, and they offer a range of different services. We've asked them to do that, to bring that alliance together themselves. We've, and they have formed those relationships during FIM. The idea behind the alliance is that we do have that range of services, but we also have member organisations who will sign up to support the alliance. So that we can better coordinate support. And I think that's the key thing here. We don't think one provider has the answer to everything. We also know with CAMHS as well, we know that 45% of referrals were didn't meet the threshold or didn't meet the criteria for CAMHS. So how do we know that a child or young person who wants that level of support we're getting any support at all? CAMHS would signpost to the various organisations that were in the area, but we wanted to be assured that we were helping all children and young people. And I think what the Alliance brings then is that wider offer, so that working alongside CAMHS, when a child comes into the system, if you like, into branch, we are able to better identify what their needs and match them to a service. And as we bring on more member services, that offer becomes much, much wider. So in some ways, we are better coordinating that offer.
So tell me, from the position of a child or young person wanting to kind of access a service in Wirral, how will it work as of when branch launches next month?
Well, they'll go onto a website, and children and young people told us very much they wanted it to be called a website, but it is actually a bit more than that. It's a platform that will host the referral mechanism in there. But the first thing they will be met with is lots of things around what good emotional health and wellbeing looks like, and a whole load of self-help resources. We haven't duplicated anything. We've linked to other local services like Family Toolbox. We've got Zillow and Sendlow, which is the local offer for children and young people with SEND, and national organisations as well. So there's lots of information and resources there. There'll also be themes. When we start to pick up on themes, there'll be articles on different things that are relevant at that time. If they then need to more help, they'll go into the referral part of the website, and that is a number of questions that you'll be asked. And behind that is an algorithm which will very much start to look at the criteria for the services that we've got and start to be able to match children and young people. So at the end of that questionnaire, they will get a number of services on offer to them, and then they have choice. Then they can read up a little bit more about the service. They can contact the service to say, I'm interested, and the service will contact them right back. So we don't have any children and young people lost in the system. Hopefully we won't have any children and young people lost in the system. And then if they do need that more higher level service, we all refer to as CAMHS, but is called My Mind, which is the new branding. If they need to get into that service, they will get into that service, because behind all of that algorithm is a matching team as well. So if there is a difficulty with a child or young person getting a match to a service that they want, that matching team actually will give them a call and go through that questionnaire with them and make sure they get the help that they need.
Brilliant.
And the beauty of this service is that kind of the way it's been commissioned, we haven't commissioned X amount of this service, X amount of that service. It's a very much an agile offer. So as young people's needs are emerging and changing over time, the Alliance model will flex to meet those needs. And similarly, we've recently commissioned a service around a risk and resilience offer for children and young people on a very similar basis. It's not an Alliance model, but it's very much on the agile. You need to flex to meet emerging needs.
Brilliant. So, we've talked a bit about that Alliance way of working, which is quite an unusual way of working. It's, we don't know of many children's alliances in the UK. And also you've invested in building a new digital tool, a new website to kind of be the front end and that doorway to those services. I know it's not just Wirral Council that's been part of this. Tell me about the partnership with the ICB.
So in terms of our commissioning, very early on, there was a recognition actually that we all commission bits of the mental health system. So very much the ICB are, the commissioners of My Mind, CAMHS services, and other targeted mental health support. We know that public health has always had a role around promoting good mental health, and children's services clearly has lots of need for supporting children and young people, from universal offers like the youth service all the way through to looked after children in need, children known to the youth offending service. So lots of different needs, and we've all commissioned that quite separately and differently. I think there was a recognition really early on, and particularly when we had the FIM group, was what would a different commissioning approach look like? And the whole basis of commissioning is using the collective resource in a local area to meet need. And we felt like we could actually do something really different here if we looked at all of the resources that we use and how we use it. And a very key part of that, I think, was, understanding those needs across all of Wirral. And we, very early on did a needs analysis to understand what that need was. And then we looked between the three commissioners for investment. And we realigned a lot of the current commissions that we had. We found new investment, and we joined it together. So it is truly a joint commission that will meet needs across a whole range, from universal to specialist.
So by commissioning it across kind of public health, children's services, and the mental health kind of area of the ICB, you're truly covering that full spectrum of wellbeing, aren't you? Right from the stuff, Julie, that you always push us on, of like the stuff that's out there in the community, the universal services that people can access, all the way through to the kind of acute mental health services under the ICB as well. It's a really holistic way of commissioning, and by pooling that resource, getting more bang for your buck, hopefully you've pulling the system together will make a massive difference. Tell me about the length of the contract. How long are you tied in with the Alliance for?
We've made allowances for an initial contract of 5 years, which really gives those organisations time to embed. And, Alliance is a new way of working for those organisations as well. They do need time to learn how to work together. And part of the Alliance includes us as commissioners. So we're integral to, over time, developing according to need. So we're really reliant on looking at our data, looking at the themes that arise from our data, looking at where we're not meeting need, and realigning things as we go. So we felt that we wanted to do it justice, really. So we will have a 5-year contract initially, but we have got extension periods within that. So we can build that Alliance.
And as Carol mentioned, there's a real focus within the Commission on real-time data and being able to use that data to inform potential future investments. One of the things we've built into the Alliance is for them to be encouraged and supported to go out and bring in further funding that, as predominantly third sector organisations, they're able to access that public sector aren't.
Brilliant. It's such a innovative way of commissioning and such a creative way of going about it. It's really brave. And I wondered, for you both in the roles that you're in, as the leaders that you are in the roles that you're in, what is the role of leadership when it comes to bringing about big change like this?
I think it was about aligning our agendas. I think, I've just referenced the different reasons why we commissioned and how money was aligned in each of the different elements of, from public health, children's services and the ICB. I think it was about actually, at the end of the day, they're all our children and young people. They're not separate children and young people. I think the leadership bit is about actually what can we do better together, and how can we work better together. And I think actually when we've done this model and this Alliance way of commissioning and obviously this joint commission and investment, I don't know why we hadn't done it previously. It just makes absolute perfect sense. So in some ways, I think it's a good blueprint for future commissioning. Yeah.
I think for me, one of the really important things is having a really strong vision. We acknowledged, as all organisations around the table at the Future Mind Steering Group, that what we had currently wasn't working. It was very piecemeal. So whilst we had a lot of really, really good support out there, providing really good services for our children and young people, it was piecemeal. There was a scattergun approach to referrals, with multiple referrals going out for some children and young people, and they're sat on several waiting lists. So this has given us the opportunity to say, actually, as if we work better as a system together, we're better able to meet those needs and not pass around children and young people to the most appropriate service. They should get the most appropriate service the first time.
Yeah,
absolutely. And you're certainly taking strides to join up that system for a young person so they get a better experience of it. They're not going to CAMHS as an inappropriate referral and getting bounced back out of the system. I can't imagine it's been an easy process for you both over the last kind of 3 years as this has been coming into fruition, and as we've gone through all the kind of ideas, phases, and working out what it's actually going to look like, and taking that Future in Mind steering group along with us and so on. But I wonder, do you have any reflections on what you found the hardest bits to be as a leader in your role?
I think the initial plan was quite ambitious. And I think being able to pull the resources behind that was very tricky in the beginning, quite difficult. We had to really look at, because we had to look wider, we had to look at services we already had and the difficult decisions about decommissioning things that maybe weren't working as well as what we wanted them to work. We also had to look at resources to commission all of the project support the capacity brought. We needed to look at resources for carrying out things like the needs analysis. So all of that planning did take not only time but resources, and I think that was really the most difficult. I think once we got those in place and once we kind of knew what that investment and those resources looked like, it then became a lot easier then to go, actually, it is right to be ambitious. And as we went along on that journey, that became a little bit easier.
I think for me, one of the really difficult things has been the time that it's taken. We had a vision and we knew where we wanted to get to, which has evolved over time. But actually, the amount of time that's needed to be invested to get it right, trying things out, testing them, going back to have discussions about, is the algorithm right? Is the digital portal right? How can we tweak it to be a better product for our children and young people? It all takes time and perseverance.
Because I think that using that algorithm and that on a website sounds a bit scary sometimes when you put mental health into kind of the hands of a machine, and it's like, where's that personal touch? So it's how children and young people use technology, and want to use technology. They don't always necessarily need someone to talk to, but also, there is somebody at the other end of that technology if people want that personal touch. And particularly, for children and young people, that's one thing, but for parents and carers, that's something that they might actually want, or other professionals is someone to just pick up the phone and talk to. Yeah. And I think an important thing as well is that some of these providers actually have bases that where children, young people and parents and carers can go along, see where the work's carried out, look at some, and Julie and I went to visit a couple of the providers, and the resources that they have and the setup that they've got are really nice atmospheres. I think it takes it away from, going to a clinic and sitting in a doctor's waiting room. These are really nice spaces, really relaxed and comfortable and welcoming spaces. So that's the added advantage, I think, of using some of our local providers.
And the support that they're offering isn't just about kind of like focusing on the issue here and now. It's very much on developing skills for life. So it's a really positive outlook in the support that they're providing. And just going back to Carol's point around kind of like the human touch, we probably haven't said much about it already, but as part of the Alliance offer and the algorithm and the digital portal, there is actually a matching team that sits behind the offer. So if there isn't a perfect match for a child or young people in the first instance, that matching team on a daily basis initially, but then it will go to a couple of times a week, we'll look at some of those referrals and make contact and try and get a little bit more information to ensure that the match is appropriate.
It's certainly taken a lot of thought and work from a lot of different people. It's this idea hasn't come out of one person's brain overnight, has it? I wonder, could you tell me a little bit about the different groups of people who've been involved in kind of helping think this through and help shape the project?
Gosh, lots of different. I think the Future Mind Julie referred to very early on at the beginning of this conversation. That was very integral about bringing people who had an interest in mental health and children and young people's emotional health and wellbeing together in Wirral. And they ranged from national organisations who were working here to whole range of local organisations, and we're really lucky in Wirral. We have a really strong voluntary community and faith sector who are really positive, really well experienced, have a really good understanding of what's happening in the area. They've been a real strength, but on that group also are very key people from across the council and the ICB and other organisations, including the youth services, who are working with children, young people and families on a day-to-day basis, and they've all regularly attended FIM and all really had a vested interest in the outcome of this. So even though we've got branch and we've got an alliance, that wider collective group of people is still there and still very active, and I think will always still be very active as well.
And at every stage of this process, we've been at length to consult with children, young people and their families and other key stakeholders such as professionals. They've driven so much of what we've done, the end products. Just if you looked at our branding, for example, they've been instrumental in the materials that we've chosen. They helped develop the strapline, Grow Your Own Way. Who would know that children and young people today would still recognise Fleetwood Mac? But there we go. So yeah, they've been instrumental and been consulted all the way through. We've tried to co-design this with them and for them.
And I think a shout out in some respects as well to our own leaders in the local authority and Wirral ICB Place for enabling us to do this, to have the ambition and to do the joint commissioning in this way. Particularly in this environment of having that investment and trying to make the best use of public resources. So it's a real strength of belief that this is the right thing to do.
Absolutely. So taking a step back, I wonder how you both kind of operate when you see the kind of needs escalating and when there's more and more in the kind of crisis space that we need to manage. How do you as leaders take the time out to work out what is needed next to kind of ring fence that resource, as you say, as well as obviously having to balance that with responding to those huge and urgent needs that are in front of you?
I think what we've done to date is responding. And it is designed to be flexible to respond to lots of different needs. I think we'll always need our crisis response, which we have. If children, young people are in crisis, there's a crisis helpline, and there's also 24/7, access through A&E. What we've tried to do is make this a bit more flexible and responsive to meet some of those crisis needs, if you like. We've also got to think about the role of everybody in the area, including our schools, about how they respond to need. And I think, this is one thing, being able to access information and support around mental health. But actually, for a lot of people, in a time of crisis, they need more than just that. They need that wraparound support. And again, we're really lucky in Wirral. We've got things like Family Toolbox, and we've got a whole range of services that will respond and wrap around families at that time. So I think this just complements all the other things that we have out there that support families.
And I think it's really important to acknowledge that one of the benefits of this, the whole approach that we're going to have, is that we're actually going to free up time eventually for CAMHS, my mind, to actually get the most appropriate referrals and not be assessing children and then having to say, actually, you don't meet our thresholds. That time that's currently spent on assessing those children will be invested in treating the children and working with the children who really need that higher, more specialist level of support.
And with organisations, in the Alliance, we want to analyse all the time, what are people seeing? Are we seeing new things? Are the themes emerging? Are we able to respond to them? And if not, then, for commissioners, that's another thing for us to look at, and for the Alliance to say, what do we need to do differently? What do we need to flex? So we've always got our eye on what's coming next.
Great. Last question I have on the topic is to find out a bit about you both. How do you look after your own wellbeing?
I think for me, it's definitely got to be cycling. I love cycling, road cycling and mountain biking. Also do a bit of yoga. And I go to the gym, but I absolutely hate the gym, I'll be honest. But I go because I read somewhere that actually it helps you with your everyday fitness, a bit of weight and resistance training. But it was in the gym the other day, and I heard a personal trainer saying to somebody on the station next to me, put your mind in the muscle. That's when the magic happens. And it really got me thinking, and I kind of thought, never thought about it like that. But I kind of like flipped it on its head. And I thought, I work out in the gym and I absolutely hate being there. But actually, it's a time that I could actually be being a bit more mindful and not thinking about what I need to get for tea on the way home, or not thinking about what I'm going to be doing in work that day, but actually just being in the moment, which is quite a precious thing to be able to do. So yeah, for me, the main thing is cycling and spending time with the family.
Brilliant. Carol, what about you?
Well, I think it's really important to find what brings you joy. And I would encourage everybody to go out there and try new things. You never know what you might like. A couple of years ago, I'm a big advocate for night schools. I think there's lots of things going on, not just in Wirral, but all over the place around different things, different activities that you can do, different skills you can learn at night school. And actually I did everything from floristry to cooking, but I did settle with creative writing, and I've really, really enjoyed the creative writing, so much so that I joined a theatre group as well, and I do some script writing for theatre. I've written things that have been in Liverpool Fringe.
Wow.
So it's really kind of given me a real hobby and a real passion. So I just encourage people, you never know what you might like. And if you feel like, sometimes you can be a bit down and a bit fed up, there are so many groups and organisations out there doing so many different things. Just go and try something new.
And I think that's why a really big part of our the website is around support and self-help and trying new things and looking at kind of what takes you out of yourself. And as Carol said, what's going to bring you joy.
Absolutely. It's a great kind of way to pull together the strands of the conversation we've had today in terms of that like more holistic view that you're both taking around young people's mental health and well-being, which has that real focus on, what brings you joy, what keeps you well, rather than that kind of deficit-led model that we can sometimes use, which is what's your problem and then we'll try and fix you. It's been a really helpful and really interesting conversation today. I think the bits that I've kind of heard the most are around it being a long haul. This kind of change, it needs brave leadership and it needs time and resource allocated to it. It can't happen overnight. I thought, the stuff you raised earlier, Julie, about the pressures that young people are under, particularly, that haven't been experienced by our previous generation. Obviously, Carol, you referenced COVID, but you referenced the kind of pressures of social media and not being able to switch your phone off because you're part of these different groups and so on. The kind of the phrase that came to mind, the quote that I found quite helpful is comparison is the thief of joy. And I wonder if like sometimes in social media and things like that, that's what we give people, isn't it? It's all those opportunities for comparison rather than those things that bring you joy.
Which is the branch tagline, isn't it? Grow your own way. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Don't look at any other people. This is your own personal journey. And it can be whatever you want it to be.
Absolutely. So I've got one final question, which we ask all of our guests on the podcast, which is what excites you about the next 12 to 18 months about working in public services in the Liverpool City region?
I think to see how branch is going to be, how it's received by children, young people, families, other professionals. It's, we planned as much as we can. We've involved all stakeholders. It's a real joint effort. Children, young people are fed into this. Let's see, how it's received. And we want to just build on it, really. If it's a good model, let's continue to do things this way. So, yeah, I'm just excited to see how it's going to be received.
Perfect. So that's it for this episode of the Fundamentally Different podcast. I want to say thank you so much to everyone for listening and to my guests, Carol and Julie, for being so generous with their time and have had that really great conversation. To check out the work that we do at Capacity, you can find all the links in the show notes. And don't forget to subscribe to more Fundamentally Different podcasts on Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you get your podcasts.